Hello and welcome to today's lesson. Today we're going to look at negative exponents. So I'm going to start off by examining something that you're already familiar with. 2 cubed is 2 times 2 times 2, which equals 8. If we follow a pattern here, 2 squared would equal 2 times 2 or 4. You can kind of look at the numbers on the right side and say the 8 changes to 4 when I divide by 2. Now if I keep going now, I'm going to look at 2 to the 1, which we know equals just the 2, and this follows the pattern perfectly. Okay, so in other words, the numbers on the right, I'm just dividing by 2 each time to figure out what these numbers are. So 2 to the 0 should equal 2 divided by 2, which is 1, and that is correct. So what would 2 to the negative 1 be? So you see how I've taken these exponents and I'm reducing them by 1, and the pattern on the right says we just divide by 2. So this should equal 1 divided by 2. And 1 divided by 2 is 1/2. So there we have it. 2 to the negative 1 equals 1/2. And in a similar way, what would 2 to the negative 2 equal? Well, if we take 1/2 and we divide that by 2, okay, so picture 1/2 and you're dividing that in half again, you'll get 1/4. So how do we make sense of this? What's a great way to understand how this works? Well, it works as follows. If you take some number, say x, we raise it to a negative exponent like negative n, you can think of it as 1 over the entire thing written on the bottom with a positive exponent. So if I show you that rule in action over here, 2 to the negative 1 can be thought of as 1 over 2 to the positive 1, which is 1/2. 2 to the negative 2 would be 1 over 2 to the positive 2, which is 2 times 2 or 4. So that's kind of how we figure out these numbers on the right. It's this rule over here, and you saw that in action. It does work. So let me show you a few examples now of this if I have other situations that I got to evaluate. So let's clear off the screen and let's have a look. Maybe our first example is we have to figure out 5 to the negative 2. Okay. So I'm going to go 1 over, and I'm going to write the entire power underneath, changing the negative exponent to a positive exponent. So now I'm going to work out 5 squared, 5 times 5, so there's my answer. It's 1 over 25. That's what 5 to the negative 2 equals. So now we're going to take one that's a little more complicated. 2/5 to the negative 2. Now there's a couple of different approaches on this, but I have found the easiest is to do the following. The top of my fraction is affected or raised to the negative 2. So it's 2 to the negative 2 that's on the top, and on the bottom I have 5 also raised to the negative 2. So the first thing I would kind of do is I rewrite it without the brackets. Then I look at these things, and rather than to use this kind of an approach, this definition, which would work, but it's very complicated when you're dealing with a fraction, it's easier to use the following trick. If you take 2 to the negative 2 and write it at the bottom, then I can rewrite the negative exponent as a positive exponent. It's kind of like up here when I took all this and I wrote it on the bottom. Okay, so I take 2 to the negative 2, put it on the bottom as 2 to the positive 2. Now I'm going to take this guy that's already on the bottom. When I move it to the top, I change the negative exponent to a positive exponent. And now I can just evaluate these numbers. 5 squared is 25. 2 squared is 4. And that's my answer, 25 over 4. So I'm going to try one more. This is the most complicated one. We're going to sort of work our way through this one here very carefully. I have negative 1/8, and I'm raising that to the negative 2/3. So this is a pretty complicated mess. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the top number and think of it as negative 1. And I'm going to say, well, that is raised to the negative 2/3. And we take the bottom number, which is 8, and that is also raised to the negative 2/3. Okay, now I'm going to take that, and I'm going to do this switcheroo trick that I did up here in this example. I'm going to take this stuff here and write it on the bottom, and change the negative exponent to a positive 2/3. And do the same thing with the 8 to the negative 2/3. I'm going to move that to the top, changing the negative exponent to a positive exponent. Now all I got to do is work out what these numbers are. Well, 8 to the 2/3, that's going to be the cube root of 8. And then we're going to take that number and square it. And negative 1 is also being cube rooted. And once I figure that number out, I'm going to square that. Okay. Cube root of 8 is 2, and 2 squared ultimately is 4. Now on the bottom I have the cube root of negative 1, which is negative 1, and then I'm going to square that, which turns into positive 1. So there's my final answer. 4 divided by 1, or just 4. And there it is. And that's where we're going to stop for now, because that's pretty complicated stuff. So we will catch you later.